When one knows for certain that to kill and to die is to do what God wishes, the hand does not waver when firing a rifle or a pistol, nor does the heart tremble when facing death. Is it God's will? Is it God's will that if necessary I should die, and if necessary I should kill? Is this a holy war or a miserable military coup? The brave men who today are rebels are the men of the deepest religious spirit, the soldiers who believe in God and in the fatherland, men who take communion daily. Our battle cry, be that one of the Crusaders. It is God's will. Long life Catholic Spain, up with Spain, o with Isabel la Católica. Good morning to everyone. Yes, I've made a mess, but let's hope it'll roll soon. This is the Spanish Civil War. In this channel, and for the next 3 years, we will follow week by week the Spanish Civil War, its battles, and the Holocaust that it provoked. It's been 5 weeks since the coup took place. This week we'll see the continuation of the Extremadura offensive that will give 2 major victories to the rebels. On the other hand, the amphibious assault of Mallorca will take place under Captain Bayo command at the end of this week. But before going back to the fray, we'd like to salute all of our British viewers, as this week, according to Thomas, the first English volunteer, John Cranford, great-grandson of Charles Darwin, joined the Republican side at Leciñena, the Aragonese front. As he didn't have any anti-fascist credential, he wasn't accepted but in a poem column. Remember, we've said before that the poem was a Trotskyist party. Apart from him, and before the arrival of the international brigades, during the first stages of the war, up to 1,000 international freedom fighters sided with the Republic. Most of them found themselves in the Aragonese front, as they were in Catalonia in order to participate in the People's Olympiad, an Olympiad organized in Barcelona as an alternative to the one held in Berlin. The People's Olympiad was programmed for the 19th of July. We could say that the only competition that took place was the shooting competition. In the description below, you'll find a link to an article that talks about this Olympiad. But back to the fray. The 10th of August, the rebel troops reached Mérida after covering almost 200 kilometers in 1 week. This meant that now the rebel forces in the south and those in the north will be connected by a corridor. They already made a first contact on the 9th. In fact, the 11th, Franco is able to have a phone conversation with Mola. According to Preston, Mola accepted in that call that it had no sense to have 2 international negotiators, giving to Franco the primacy in the relations with Italy and Germany. Thus will strengthen the position of Franco as a primus inter pares. The next objective of the rebels won't be Madrid, as expected. Even before the fall of Mérida, the 11th, Franco had already ordered Yagüe to diverge his troops in order to take Badajoz. He will take command of the troops in Mérida the next day and march towards Badajoz, near the Portuguese border. Badajoz was still a walled city. It resisted for 20 days Wellington's troops until it fell the 6th of April 1812. It was not a primary objective for the rebels, and capturing the city would translate in the first important delay on their original plan of taking Madrid as soon as possible. The closure of the Portuguese border won't have that negative effects on the Republic, because Portugal had already aligned with the rebels. This decision, if we believe in the letter that Franco wrote to Mola the 11th, before the call we mentioned, and that states that his main objective continues to be the fall of Madrid as soon as possible, can be understood considering that Franco was an Africanista, and since the start of the Extremadura campaign was conducting the kind of brutal war he knew. And we could say that he was following the strategy of the oil stain used by the French under General Hubert d'Atouis in Morocco and Algeria. The idea consists in dominating strongly one place, then spread across the surface of the country like an oil stain on water. The defeats of the Spanish colonial army, where Franco served at the beginning of the 20th century, came in part because the Spanish army was not able to secure the territory they held, thus compromising their supply lines and rearguard. So Franco decided that the next objective of the campaign had to be Badajoz. The rebel aviation started bombing the city the 7th of August. The 13th, the rebel troops arrived there and prepared to launch an assault. Colonel Puigdendolas, defender of the city, even with continuous desertion, had prepared the city for an attack. This attack started early in the morning of the 14th. Meanwhile, a Republican counterattack failed to recover Mérida, but threatened, for a while, the rebel supply line. In Badajoz, a group of treacherous soldiers opened the wall door in the bomb barracks. Meanwhile, the Legion charged through the Trinity door, suffering lots of casualties, and the regulars attacked from the north. By 1430, the rebels were already in the city center. Puigdendolas, wounded with fever and overwhelmed by treason, flies to Portugal. The attackers suffered between 185 and 300 casualties, between dead and wounded. As the city falls, an horrendous repression begins. During the afternoon, 800 people were shot. In the course of the night, 1,200. A study of Espinosa Mestre suggests that the number of deaths in Badajoz repression would be at least 3,800. Some sources claim that this could go up to 9,000. Revisionist historians put it around 1,500. Even if Yahweh himself will talk about 4,000 casualties. The Red Terror, before the fall of the city, produced less than 250 deaths. Yahweh had prevented the journalists to enter the city, but the 15th, some of them were allowed to enter, among them the Portuguese Mário Pris, that had to be interned in a mental institution after what he saw. The 17th, so tomorrow, René Brut from Pathé will record with his camera piles of bodies and will be threatened with death. The rebels tried to deny the Badajoz massacre to the international war. Meanwhile, they will use it as a terror weapon against their enemies, threatening them with the same fate. Yahweh, as pointed previously, would say to John Whittaker, "Of course we shot them. What did you expect? Was I supposed to take 4,000 Reds with me as my column advances racing against time? Was I expected to turn them loose in my rear and make them make Badajoz red again?" The towns and villages near Badajoz were occupied also. The stain of oil spreads, and the usual repression begins. Even though the international community continued to believe the histories of the wealthy people that had the means to escape the Red Terror, and it will take too long, maybe until the war is already lost, for the international opinion to side with the Republic. In the Basque Front, we saw how last week the rebels surrounded Tolosa. The 10th, the city is evacuated by the forces defending it. The rebels will use this week to reorganize their troops, as some Republican militiamen are still in the surrounding area and Tolosa is being bombed by Republican airplanes. The 16th, as the Republicans retreat to Andonain in order to establish a new defensive line, the rebels start the preparations in order to attack the new defensive positions. By doing so, they will get closer and closer to Donostia. The other Basque column, under Beorlegui, that we left fighting in Renteria a couple of weeks ago, after getting reorganized, marched now to Irun. This week they will start taking positions in order to surround the city. They will take the fort over Light after a bitter fight in the 15th, thus forcing the Republican troops defending Pagogaña to retreat to Irun in order not to get cut out. Also in the north, the Galician columns that took Luarca continue their advance. Against time, in order to relieve the besieged rebels in Gijón. Even if they are advancing and shelling the Republican defenders from air and sea, the resistance is getting stronger, and the rebels decide to divide its main force that advance following the coastline in two columns. One of them will divert south in order to contact with another column under Marcelino López Pita that is going north, though creating a wider front more difficult for the Republican forces to defend. Last week, we saw how the CCMMA was preparing for an amphibious landing to retake control of the Balearic Islands. At the end of this week, the 16th, the amphibious landing takes place. 8,000 troops disembark in Porto Rojo, in the east of the island. The rebels have less than 2,500 troops to counter them. But we will have to wait until the next week to see how the campaign develops. This campaign was carried out without neither the approval nor even the knowledge of the central government. Azaña was both angry and surprised. Last week we told you about the different colors we used to show that there was no political unity. This offensive is an example of it. Some historians even point out that anarchist militias consider the fall of Zaragoza crucial, but they perceive the African army that was advancing towards Madrid as something far away, not even related to the war they were fighting. As the war will advance and the armies will stall, we'll have more time to cover all the political turmoil behind the scenes. The 15th of August is a very special day for Catholics in Spain and everywhere in the globe, as they celebrate the Assumption of Mary to heaven, declared a dogma in 1950. In this day, they homage the different representations of the Virgin. For example, in Pamplona they celebrated La Virgen del Sagrario, and they killed 60 Republicans in her honor. In Sevilla is the festivity of the Virgen de los Reyes, protectress of the city. Franco takes one more step towards becoming the face of the rebellion. In a big ceremony around the monarchic flag, the rebels from the south, remember that in the north they will still be fighting under the Republican flag or the Carlist flag, adopt the monarchist flag as symbol of the new Reconquista. Notice the flag has still the Republican shield with walls instead of a crown. The flag with the chicken, as it's called in Spain, appeared in 1938. Queipo de Llano, in the ceremony with his natural savoir-faire, will make a speech quoting that probably the violet of the Republican flag meant immorality. Just the day before, Queipo had General Campins shot, even if Franco pleaded him not to do so. Meanwhile, the expansion of the oil stain that was dropped in Sevilla continued. After the fall of Huelva, the villages around fall one by one. This week we'll see the fall of Zalamea la Real. Even if we've already colored the whole zone in green, the area near El Cerro de Andévalo is still resisting and will do so for the next 3 weeks. On the other side of the Andalusian expansion, Varela arrived the 18th at Loja. Okay then, we started the week, as always, with a quote. This one from the senior canon of Salamanca, pronounced in the radio. We already considered the importance of the radio and, in general, the media, but we used this opportunity to remark it again. This speech makes us either understand why some journalists call this war a remake of the 30 Years' War, and also where most of the Catholic Christian spirit was. Said most, because this week a priest was killed by the rebels, Father Eladio Zelaya. He protested for the killings in the rebels' side. In the rearguard, this week saw how a train full of right-wing prisoners that was going to Madrid was stopped by the militias that shot 193 of 245 of them. Also this week in Cartagena, after the arrival of the battleship Jaime I with dead and wounded aboard, because of a rebel bombing, 199 rebels, civil guards, army and naval officers are killed. In Madrid, and with the presence of international press, the trials for the rebel generals Fanjul and Fernández de Quintana takes place. They are found guilty and will be shot the 17th. In the anarchist Barcelona, a squad of the CCMMA occupies the Justice Palace. Some judges will be killed in the following days, and the judicial records will be set ablaze. In order to put some order in the ensuing chaos and to rebuild a sort of a state, the Council of Economy of Catalonia is also created. We would like to end this week with a couple of references of the upcoming tragedy. First, the 14th of August, Mola, director of the coup, allegedly said, "A year ago, I would have trembled at having to authorize a firing squad. I wouldn't have been able to sleep for the sorrow of it. Now, I can sign 3 or 4 every day without bathing a nail light." Also this week, on Sunday, Federico García Lorca, the people's poet, is detained. As always, if you missed our last week's episode, here's the link. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe us. If you enjoyed it, share it. We have to bring light to the history of Spain. If you can take it to school also, do it. If you are able to support us in our Patreon channel, this could also be great. Thanks for your attention, goodbye, and salud.